How do we bring about a cultural change in how torture is viewed?
There are many ways of ordinary policing that seem to have been overtaken by this simple confession. Do your leaders want to be Nelson Mandela, or would they prefer to be Idi Amin?
The Parliament recently repealed a law that broadly empowered the National Human Rights Commission. They've brought back an old law. This law cripples the human rights watchdog. What does this mean for the human rights sphere of Bangladesh, for the overall human rights situation in the country? To talk about this and more, we have with us the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, Dr. Alice Edwards. Thank you for joining us on Star Connects today. Dr. Edwards, you were talking about the need to have an A-class National Human Rights Commission. And I know that that refers to the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, the kind of classification they do for human rights institutions all across the world. But just for the lay person who doesn't understand what an A-class or a B status means, what does that mean for the kind of National Human Rights Commission Bangladesh needs?
So it's a really good question. A National Human Rights Commission becomes one of the independent bodies that is a monitor of the practices of public authorities, whether it's a health authority, prisons, policing, children's services, etc. And the most important part of the A status is to ensure that that body has been given the legislative power to be independent, politically independent, financially independent, and substantively independent, which means they get to choose their own agenda within this broad framework of human rights. It's one of the most important modern developments we have in human rights. Most societies around the world have a human rights commission these days. It plays a very important role in society. It can assist the government in proposing changes. It can inform the government when things are going incorrectly, and it can also, and it should be able to be empowered to carry out investigations of a human rights character.
When we use the word independent, that's thrown around a lot. But what does autonomy really look like for an institution like this?
So first of all, it will require a legislative instrument, so a law. Unfortunately, the ordinance that was meant to be extended from the interim government has lapsed. The law should provide a financial basis. There should be no political influence on this body, which means also a proper selection process for the commissioners who would form the National Human Rights Commission. Their remuneration should be assured to a certain level so that problems around corruption that we might see arising are also eliminated, and also a clear outline of their work. The preference for these bodies is that they report to Parliament and not to the government, that it isn't the government that gets to choose who the commissioners are. They should also have security of tenure, that they should know how long they're in the position and not have the worry that, in fact, the government of the day may change the head of the commission or the commissioners for someone that they prefer. That's kind of what independence means in that context.
All seems like a far reach at the moment under the current law, which also restricts the Human Rights Commission from investigating disciplined forces. They're not allowed to do that. They can simply ask the government for a report, which the government may or may not give, and then they can, give the recommendations based on the report. Now, how do you expect a government to eradicate torture if the NHRC cannot investigate disciplined forces?
Look, the NHRC, no doubt, is an incredibly important body, and I'd really like to see the government move forward with that. They have indicated to me that they intend to make some adjustments to the law. We don't yet know what those adjustments are, but certainly they should be in alignment with the A status required by this international oversight entity. And of course, there are other pillars within society that also have human rights obligations. It's not the sole responsibility for the National Human Rights Commission. Parliamentarians themselves, for example, can visit places and should be able to visit places of detention. Parliamentarians should be able to meet victims and survivors. They should put forward legislation. There's also the Law Commission that has a role here in either initiating new proposals for legislation that are human rights compliant and or to receive instructions from the government. In fact, your constitution is relatively robust. A very strong Article 35, subsection 5, that no one shall be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. What is also needed is investigations that are separate from that National Human Rights Commission, but which can feed into criminal procedures. One of the issues that has arisen continuously during my visit here in Bangladesh is a practice of the police of confessional evidence, of gathering information and confessions from suspects and witnesses, but as the sole or primary source of their evidence. Yeah. And where that is not supplemented by other investigative tools, of course, we end up in a cycle of violence and beatings and coercion and intimidation within the police force. But then there's the question about if that happens, who investigates that? Now, the National Human Rights Commission is one to do a human rights style investigation, but there should also be an independent police complaints body. That is also separate.
Police commission, which was supposed to happen,
yes,
didn't.
I also understand there was a proposal for the police commission, a body that can, anytime there is an injury or a death under police or custody of the authorities, so it could also be in a psychiatric hospital, for example, it could be in a public hospital. If there are unexplained deaths, then there should be an automatic reporting to the police commission, in this context, in other words, independent police complaints authority.
Right. I mean, the fact that any kind of physical violence does amount to torture if it happens in the custody of the police or the law enforcement. This concept, it seems very alien to the culture of how law enforcement deal with citizens in Bangladesh. Anytime a citizen in conflict with the law is arrested, goes to the police station, he or she will invariably come somewhat in contact with some form of torture. It may not go to very extreme lengths, it not go to extreme, it may not be extreme torture, but at the same time, even if the police, for example, hit the person for no good reason, if the person is unarmed, if the person is not putting up a fight and the police decided to hit the person or did not let the person sleep throughout the night, that does also amount to torture. How do we bring about a cultural change in how torture is viewed and how, and if we can't do that, how do we eradicate torture?
So I would say, first of all, it does require leadership from the very top, from the parliamentarians, but also from those that are leaders in the police and other uniformed services. Without that leadership, it relies on individuals to do better, to be better. You're absolutely right that, any time the state is engaging in violent or abusive conduct, it falls within this broader umbrella of torture or other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. It is an absolute prohibition under international law. Bangladesh ratified, which means they agreed to the terms of the United Nations Convention Against Torture. This is one of the few obligations under international law that is considered so egregious that when one person is violated in one country, it is considered a violation against the whole of humanity when it is the severe form of cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. That might seem very legalistic. You also have, from 2013, a reasonably good act, the Prevention of Torture and Custodial Deaths Act, that needs to be fully enforced. But at the end of the day, there are so many practical ways in which one can change the culture of police. And my role is also to talk to the police and encourage them not only about removing torture from their toolkit, but replacing it with other methods that work. And
So basically, equipping them with something that works rather than
yes,
that they don't have to beat up people.
Exactly. You can't just say you can't do this and then all of their old habits of solving crimes by simply getting forced confessions. That's one thing. And we have new techniques now about investigative interviewing, which means that you are relying on rapport building. Stresses, torture on the brain actually prevents people from recall. It prevents them from actually being good witnesses or good witnesses in courts of law. Neuroscience tells us that, in fact, it really impacts memory, it impacts cooperation. There have been these studies in Australia and Canada and the United Kingdom of convicted felons and whether when they first came to the police station they were prepared to cooperate or not. And the large majority actually were either thinking about confessing or cooperating. As soon as they were mistreated, even just verbally abused, they decided, forget it, I'm not going to cooperate. So it's the reverse effect than the police expect. And I would also say that there are roles here for the magistrates and for the courts. It's very important that when someone is brought within 24 hours of their detention, as the law sets in Bangladesh, that they are asked about, have you been well treated? If there are any signs of injuries, there should be a medical examination. The magistrate should not be sending back people who are claiming to have been tortured or ill-treated back to the same people who are the accused in that circumstance. There are also rules that no evidence that was coerced or obtained under torture or other ill treatment can be admissible in court proceedings, except for the proceedings against the perpetrators. But there are many ways in which torture can be eradicated, but you're absolutely right. It needs to start from the leadership in terms of a culture of human rights needs to be developed to replace essentially a normalization of state violence in this country.
Because, I'm thinking that, say someone comes up to a magistrate with no injury marks, no bruises, no physical sign of torture that would show up in a medical exam, and if the person is saying that that person has not been treated well in custody, has been ill-treated in custody, should that be enough of, say, an evidence or a testimony for the magistrate to take action on just that claim itself? Or can that be considered something that's being said for the person because the person is trying to perhaps get out of going to jail?
Right. So, of course, one needs to have these safeguards in place. But at a minimum, there should be then an interview with that person. They should be taken aside to understand what happens. In other countries, the judges themselves, the magistrates, will have their own detention facilities. So they would then be moved from police custody into the judicial custody, perhaps while that inquiry is being carried out. So there are some structural deficiencies in the Bangladeshi system. I've also heard that magistrates just, even when people do appear bruised and injured, now of course this could have happened because they were in a fight on the street, that they, had problems at home and therefore they're coming in at this point. So it could be evidence of the crime of which they're being accused rather than torture. We have to understand that. But the magistrates have a responsibility, and the judges, to make inquiries when there are reasonable grounds to assume or to indicate that torture or treatment may have occurred.
You talk about structural deficiencies. I've recently been hearing about police stations needing CCTV cameras for it to be made mandatory for policemen to wear body cams. How important are things like these in ensuring transparency in policing?
So first I would say in the interviewing room, every interrogation should be audio or video recorded. I can give you an example from the United Kingdom where they used to have a continuous delay in the proceedings by asking to see with these allegations of torture or abuse or mistreatment. Then when they started recording them, not only did it stop that style and that, torture-related interrogation. But also, the lawyers no longer even had to request the tape because everybody knew what was on the tape. They didn't need to go through these long transcripts of the tape to see whether it did or didn't happen. At the beginning, they had to do that. But over time, they now record everything. No one asks for the tapes because more or less that torture has been eliminated. Of course, there will always be incidents. But then there are problems of, then sometimes that abuse happens outside that interrogation room. Mm-hmm. And that's where the CCTV comes in and the body cameras. There are shortcomings with all of these things, but it's really important that police and other uniformed, including prisons, are well trained, that they understand the rationale for these procedures. It's not only to treat people respectfully, but it will improve judgments, it will reduce miscarriages of justice, it will stop in future claims of compensation. So here in Bangladesh, it is a really important project because of the normalization of this state violence over many, many years and many decades. But it is possible, and other countries show that one can rebuild these institutions that benefit the police so that they don't have to go to work and beat people up also, but that they will also have good resolution of cases, that there will be robust judgments in court. So there is a lot that can be done, and that's what I'd like to see investigated here, and that the government embrace this as well as the uniformed forces embracing it.
This all sounds like a dream, but it's going to require so much structural retrofitting. And I think a complete overhaul of what the police can look like in Bangladesh. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to actually get there. But I wonder if we can start questioning some of the more fundamental methods that the police use in terms of how to interrogate people. One of them is, I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's called taking in someone for a remand. So it's where the police ask the court to, they request the court to grant them access to an inmate. The inmate will be staying inside the police station, wherever the police would like to keep them, usually in like a holding cell or something like that. And then they can interrogate the inmate for as long as the court allows them to do that. It usually lasts days, and a person can be taken into remand over and over again, as many times as a court allows. I've wondered if there is another way of doing this, because when a police has access, almost unfettered access to an inmate for days, and the inmate is staying within their premises, in their custody, once again for days, a lot of things can happen which can go unnoticed. And this is often where torture takes place the most. I wonder if there are other ways of doing this, if Bangladesh is perhaps behind on some of the global standards regarding this.
So you raise a very serious matter, but there are appropriate and professional standards that apply in these circumstances. First of all, the police should not be relying wholly on a confession for their criminal cases. They need to be doing investigations beforehand. I've heard about shortcomings in terms of forensic capacity and expertise in this country. That is something the international community should assist with. There are even fingerprinting is not always carried out, wrongful identification, alibi checking, going to the scene, photographing the evidence. There are many ways of ordinary policing that seem to have been overtaken by this simple confession concept.
The remand, yeah.
And actually, police will tell you it's quite hard to get a confession out of someone if they haven't done the crime. And so there are all these professional standards, and the national policing curriculum needs to be reviewed to be able to make sure that police are doing their job more appropriately. I'd also say the magistrates and the judges should be asking for better investigations.
Right.
They should be pushing cases out if they're not properly investigated. In some countries, which I think is a very good practice, the law will say that the confession evidence is insufficient. So it cannot stand on its own. Others will say you can only secure a confession if it is before a judge, or at least with a lawyer present. So the other side of this is the rights of the detainee. So one is the professional standards of the police, and the other are the rights of the detainee. And essentially, you know, a detainee should only be, or accused, should only be taken into places that are officially registered. Their detention itself should be registered. That would be great if that was on a database, so people know where people are. It can also help with later alibis, of course, or undermine alibis. People need to be able to inform a family member that they are in detention. That is a standard right at international law. Audio and video recording, I already mentioned, to make sure that there is no pressure, coercion, violence. And of course, to be brought promptly before a judge, which in this country is very short and is 24 hours, very good. However, as you said, there's this repetitive bringing before a judge. The judges need to step up. They cannot continue to approve just because the police are saying we need more time, we need more time. Even those extensions should be limited. In most other jurisdictions, that would be limited to 48 hours and then maximum 72 hours. If you don't have enough information at that point, you cannot charge the person and they should be let go. So there are these safeguards. Hence the reason why the evidence gathering needs to happen before you bring someone in.
It's so funny that you say that they should be let go. Usually what happens is that they're sent back to jail and they're held in jail. This is pre-trial detention, as we all know, while the police keep gathering evidence to formally charge the person of the crime. We've been facing a bit of a conundrum in Bangladesh where the political activists of the former ruling party, Awami League, I'm sure you've heard of it, they are now being named in all of these cases, these cases have 500 people accused for one single murder, for example. And these cases are clearly not very well done. They're not very well researched, not very well investigated. This is simply being pushed out from the victim's family, who are, of course, seeking justice, and as they should be seeking justice. But these cases have ended up politically persecuting Awami League political activists who are now being held in pretrial detention on cases that are still being investigated year and a half on. The Daily Star recently we recently did a report on how 90% of these murder cases are still undergoing investigation, meaning no one has been formally charged, and yet thousands of people are being held. Is pretrial detention, especially in a circumstance like this where we're clearly seeing it persecuting or disproportionately affecting one political party, is it amounting to torture?
So clearly this needs judicial oversight, and the police should be non-politicized. The investigative body, there should be a professional police force. The same standards apply regardless of what political party you represent. And what I would really like to see is that, a society cannot be built on cycles of revenge. It really needs to be built on the rule of law, the separation of powers, human rights, and all of this will also lead to, political stability, peaceful transition of power in the next phase, and overall everyone will be better off. And I know this seems far from the present circumstances. We have to start somewhere. And in fact, there were some developments under the interim administration. I've heard some good statements while I've been here about a willingness for cross-party engagement, a parliamentary committee on human rights in the parliament that brings all of the parties together, as well as independents and others who would like to form part of this, to discuss human rights issues, to advise when pieces of legislation come forward, would be a tremendous step to set the government off in the right direction. There are really high expectations that I've heard across Bangladesh. It's a moment of great opportunity. I really hope this government won't flounder under these great expectations. One thing I would say, which is counterintuitive, that the government should also be prepared once there is an open complaints procedure where people have access to an independent investigation, that there are practices and procedures against intimidation and reprisals. Once that system is set up, the likelihood is that cases of torture will skyrocket.
Right.
And
which happened with the Enforced Disappearance Commission. Once they finally started investigating enforced disappearances, they realized it's systemic.
Yes, and a government needs a strong backbone for this, but also to already sensitize the population that there will be, in this period, there are going to be old cases of people coming forward. Finally, it's a sign actually that society is open.
Right.
If they are able to make their complaints. Over time, of course, one wants that curve to start going down.
Yeah.
But we can't expect the police officer in a village somewhere or in a major town who has been using the same violent practices for the last 10, 20 years to change overnight. But with training, with support, with a change in mentality, with an understanding of why this should be changed, it will, I'm confident, it will change if all the right matrix are in place.
You sort of slided right into my last question. You're right, there's going to be a surge in cases showing up if we actually start taking this seriously and if we start having, the frameworks, the mechanisms in place for victims to speak out. So why would a political government, or why should a political government not fear an accountable process like this? Why should they not fear a strong, autonomous NHRC?
Look, if a government wants cycles of violence to continue against its own people, it's not representing the people. If it goes on the revenge against its political opponents, it can be sure that there will be revenge future. Now is the time to break with that practice, to really decide what type of society Bangladeshis want to live in, what type of legacy the leaders want to leave. It's almost, this might sound a little strange, but I kind of think it's, do your leaders want to be Nelson Mandela, or would they prefer to be Idi Amin? And that, appeals to people's hearts, and that you're all Bangladeshis together, no matter your ethnicities, your religions, your sex, your age, your social class. But it is compelling. But on the other hand, torture is a scourge on society. It leads to corruption. Sometimes torture is done because of corruption, because of bribery, because people won't pay the bribes when stopped in the traffic, etc. But it also therefore leads to economic instability. And for trading partners, they want to be able to trust that there is a stable political government, that corruption is minimized, and with all of that, torture will also be minimized.
You've raised the bar high, Dr. Edwards. we have a lot to achieve, a lot of work a lot of work needs to be done. And I don't know how far we will be able to achieve some of the standards that you've set out for us with your visit here.
But I have to say, the last week I've been here, there are incredibly hardworking people in Bangladesh. There are people working around the clock, human rights persons, lawyers, judges, journalists, street vendors, people working in the shops. So I think there's certainly the capacity and the ability to do this. Whether there's the political will, we have to wait to see.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Zaina.